Hello, one and all, and welcome to a Shrines variation of the Brewing Labs. Now, I don't really have an intro skip this time around because mostly I wanted to actually have enough time to actually talk about the story of how this deck formed. More or less, before the start the deck, we have to actually talk about the one deck that kind of started it all, the meme deck that's around the one specific card, Tibalt's Trickery. 2 mana, counter target spell, and essentially you mill a few random cards, and then you essentially reveal cards on the top of your library until you can cast a spell that wasn't countered with Tibalt's Trickery. You can also accidentally reveal Tibalt's Trickery with this. Now, most people, when this initially spoiled, had kind of underrated the card, more or less, because mostly they were just kind of went into their tangent of more or less like, oh, white doesn't get counter magic again, yet red got a counter spell, even though red does have counter magic, mostly in the chaotic variety like this, but nevertheless, it actually brewed a meme deck that I think Merchant was the one that initially just started the whole craze with the deck. Basically, the premise around Tibalt's Trickery is the meme deck where you essentially run about as much zero-cost spells as you can, and then you use Tibalt's Trickery on turn 2 to counter the zero-cost spell and try to ramp into a ridiculously big game-ending spell, like Ugin, the Ultimatums, Kiora Bets the Sea God, etc., etc., etc. Now, I'll say this. I know a lot of people who like this deck. I'm going to be honest, I really don't. And it's not like the realms where a lot of people get salty with this deck, especially in Historic, where you have access to stuff like Ulamog, or in other Eternal formats where you have more access to more volatile late-game threats, let's just say. The reason why I don't really like this deck is just, it's so inconsistent. I know some people who are able to play this deck and like, oh, I get like a 67% win rate, or I'm able to win like a lot of games with this. But every time I played this deck, even in best of one, there's just so many opportunities to lose with this deck. Like, you either go against a person that has the perfect answer to the being you ramp into, you have hand disruption that takes out your Tibalt's Trickery, and there's just even counter magic in general. So, I really don't like this deck. Now, does that mean I don't like Tibalt's Trickery? On the contrary, no. I actually do kind of like this card. Not for the cheesy way you can do it, but actually because there's a realm of the card that actually I think wasn't explored after people just saw this whole initially, oh, I'm going to cheese a turn 2 Ugin, ha 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 ha, essentially. And the basic premise I kind of wanted to experiment with the deck was I originally had it in like a Mardu control list, more or less, which I think I still have that list. Ah, here we go. I put it in a Mardu control list where I decided to keep the somewhat cheesy package where you try to get it on turn 2 to ramp into something significant. However, there is just also the factor that it can just be a hard counterspell with stuff like Archon Amelia, Draneth's Magistrate, etc., etc., even Rule Law, that one white cost enchantment that I can't remember. Actually, Deafening Silence. Yeah, like stuff like that. So, there's a way that you can actually use Tibalt's Trickery as a hard counterspell. However, there was also another thing I kind of discovered when also playing this deck, essentially. And that is the factor that there are some times where Tibalt's Trickery can be used to actually counter kind of like a dead spell within your hand, which then can hopefully get you into a more powerful late-game spell. For example, like during one of the games I was playing this deck, I was playing Elspeth's Nightmare, and then I had a second one in hand, really didn't need the second one, so I cast it, used Tibalt's Trickery, got a Ugin out of it. So there are some times where it actually is kind of a way to fish out a dead card in your hand to fish out something in your deck that might actually be a lot more board warping, for lack of a better word. So then, with that thought in the mind, I originally actually watched essentially a content creator by the name of Magic Noobs. Very fun content creator. I do love seeing that content creators deck techs and such. Very fascinating. The one that I was watching initially after playing this game was their take on the 5-color Shrines deck. This is where we get to the Shrines portion of this deck tech. Now, their variation was actually running the Search for Greatness, which, the more I play with the card, I think the card's actually a lot better than I thought. It's still a little bit tricky, you have to put it in the right deck, but it's a pretty powerful card. Nevertheless, sidetrack there. So, essentially what happened is I kind of noticed when seeing the games and such, one of the cons of Shrines was the factor that when you have a shrine you already played and you have a dead shrine in your hand, if you don't have the red shrine where you can discard a shrine and deal damage to something, you do have a bunch of dead cards in your hand. And then now you kind of see where the light bulb clicked, essentially. So then I was like, wait a minute. Why don't we make a deck where essentially it has the Tibalt package, but not the cheese package, but still it's just your typical shrine deck? And this is the one that I was playing with a little bit, and I got to Diamond with this deck, which I am still dumbfounded that I got to Diamond with this deck. Now, after getting to Diamond, the deck was a little bit less consistent, so I decided to do a little bit more tweaking to the deck, and well, here's the deck. Basically, with the Shrines of Tibalt, the basic premise is kind of like your 5-color Shrines deck. You're trying to play multiple Shrines to get to the Sanctum of All win condition. When you do, you essentially, your Shrines double, and one of your primary win conditions is mostly Life Drain with the Sanctum of the Stone Fanes, more or less. So then what we have is we have pretty much an early game control shell where we do have the Heartless Act to help us counter stuff, but we also have a minimal of 2 Tibalt's Trickery as well as Valky to help us control early game, / also if we have a dead card in our hand, such as one of the Shrines, and we don't have the other Shrine out, we can essentially cast the Shrine even though the Shrine's on the battlefield, hold it on the stack, counter it, and then essentially then also just hopefully get into another Shrine or another format warping spell, more or less. And the reason why I put it down to 2 rather than 3 or 4 is because I really don't like the matchup where when you do this trick that you get Tibalt's Trickery. That just doesn't feel bad, if I'm being honest. So that's kind of why I went down to 2 rather than going full playset or 4 or 3 of it. Besides that, we also have some control spells in the deck. We have stuff like Soul Shatter, as well as Binding the Old Gods, which help us ramp, as well as remove problematic permanents. We also have Kalit's, forgive me with the pronunciation there, Destiny's Hand. This is mostly in here to help us essentially more or less... Hang on a little bit. This is a little bit live, but I'm actually going to fix it a little bit. Testing. Okay, there we go. Sorry, there was like a little bit of static, which I was trying to eliminate, at least from my side of the end. Maybe you're not hearing it or such. If you did, I apologize in advance. Anyways, with Kalit's, essentially, the basic premise is we are playing a lot of enchantments since we're playing Shrines. We can use as removal, we can use as the fish Shrines, and if we can get to the ultimate, we then can just return all the Shrines that we need to from the battlefield, or even Binding of the Old Gods and stuff. We also are running Doomscar as a board wipe. We're also running a few, kind of like 1 or 2 of legendary cards, such as stuff like Valky, Ugin. I really wanted to just stick to 1 Ugin because, you know, it's kind of a little bit annoying to have decks where it's like you have to automatically put Ugin within the deck design. Still, Ugin is a powerful card, but I don't really like it as a 2 of in this list, mostly because we are wanting to keep stuff on our board, and this wipes our board, so yeah. We are also running Vorinclex, because Vorinclex is just a powerful late-game drop. We're running Tergrid, because with stuff like Sanctum of the Fruitful Harvest, we're going to generate a lot of mana. So then if we're on the Lantern portion of it, we can just essentially win by essentially life-draining our opponent using activating the Tergrid's Lantern, untapping, activate, untap, activate, etc. And also have the Tergrid portion as well, so if our opponent's discarding or sacking, we could get some stuff from our opponent. We also have Kaya in here, the Inexpro, great card. Just essentially helps us to more or less... The +1 doesn't really do much with the deck other than Tergrid as well as Valky, more or less. However, mostly we're doing it for either the -3, and if we can get the +1 bonus, it's nice, but if we can get to the ultimate, if Vorinclex is on the battlefield, that's a major plus. Being able to cast a legendary spell for free from either library, pretty much graveyard, hand, or exile, very nice, especially since we are learning a lot of legendary permanents. And the land base is pretty much 5 basics, along with just a 2 of each of the pathways, and 3 of the triomes. So that is the deck. Let's actually give it a few games on ladder and just see how it does. Shall we? That we shall. Bada beep, bada boop. Okay, so... And of course this is like a best of 1 deck, but if you want to, you could probably manipulate a sideboard for the deck to help with that. One of the variations I did test initially of the deck is actually running the Raven's Warning as a 2-up in the list, where you can essentially just toot out for any legendary spell or even one of the shrines from your sideboard. But I didn't really like that as much due to the factor that a lot of people are running kind of like mill strategies. Nevertheless, I do like this hand. We have blue, red, and such. We can Tibalt's Trickery, counter something that we think is really problematic. Or if we can, we could have like a cheap spell and just counter it with Tibalt's Trickery. So I like this hand. We're going to keep it. And yes, I will say, you could, if you want to, maybe cut a few cards to throw some of the Zero Mana spells in the deck design if you want to do the cheesy Tibalt's Trickery turn 2 shtick. Like I said, I really don't like the cheese strategy because I don't like the consistency of it, but that's an option if you want to do that. So, nevertheless, our opponent is the Belnius, I believe it's their pronunciation. So, we're going to play a Swamp here and see what we got. Okay, interesting. So, we're going to just play a mountain here. We could just foretell this, but we have the Heartless Act on the trigger, so I think I'm just going to hold on the Heartless Act. See what they play here. The fact they're playing Fabled Passage, yeah, this might be... This is either Izzet Tempo, or... Yeah, it looks like Izzet Tempo. Okay. Play this as a blue source. I think we're still going to hold on the Heartless Act, because usually these temple lists like to run usually like a Fairy Dragon by now, or usually just an aggressive drop. This could also just be a Giants list, but the fact that they're playing stuff like Crash Fruit makes me think it's a tempo list. There we go. We're just going to destroy that bird before it becomes problematic. One on top, one on bottom. Okay, that's nice. So, I think I'm going to put this on the green, then play Sanctum of the Calm Waters. Hope we draw into a white source for stuff like Doomscar, or draw into a green Sanctum, essentially, to help us with the mana fixing. There is a part of me that is tempted to throw at least either one or two of the World Tree in this deck, though I do feel like with already all the Triomes, as well as the Pathways and such, I feel like our mana base is solid enough. Though the World Tree is tempting within these 5-color deck designs, I'm not going to deny that. Well, there's the Fairy Dragon. Are they going to buff up the Fairy Dragon, is the question. Yes, but not in the way it usually happens. So, we're going to draw a card. There is a Tergrid. Interesting. I think I'm going to discard the Tibalt's Trickery because I think we're at the point now where we just are wanting to make plays here. So I'm going to play the Lantern portion of this. We're going to play this portion just in case if we get another Tergrid. We're going to make our opponent either sacrifice or lose some life. Yeah, they're going in the burn strategy. So one on the top, one on the bottom. Yeah, we're going to draw again. Ooh, Binding the Old Gods is good. I think we discard the Doomscar now, since we don't have any white whatsoever. I'm going to discard this, because this can get bigger. Then we just force our opponent to either lose life or sacrifice their bird. I think they're just going to do the life loss approach. They're going to off. This could be a problem, because if our opponent has, like, any burn spell, we're probably dead. Okay, they just need 2 more cheap spells. Do they have the shock? Okay, we're gonna play this. I'm gonna draw. Not what I had in mind. I mean, we're dead. We might as well just get foreign Klutz out. Have some fun. But yeah, our opponent can just attack in and win the game. So first round goes to Izzet Tempo. Mostly we just didn't run. We didn't get enough removal in this matchup, or we didn't even got enough white for the board wipe. It's kind of like one of those awkward ones where essentially you kind of wanted to play all the spells there, and we were just missing the one white we needed for Kalets to exile this. So. Now, some of you might be wondering why I'm not conceding at the moment. Mostly it's because I don't know if the opponent's trying to achieve a quest and such. So that's why I kind of let the opponents play their turn out, if they are going to play their turn out, rather than just swing it automatically. Because, like, maybe our opponent had, like, a quest where it's like, cast 30 blue spells or stuff like that. So I always like to keep good courtesy and such if people are casting extra spells for the sake of their quests. It's not always BMing. You can kind of tell with the mannerisms when it's a BMing, casting magic, prolonging the game, or when it's just somebody just cast, and just wanting to complete their quest and such. So, okay, next game. This one's not bad, but only... Well, actually, it's not... Actually, it's pretty good. Because the thing is, we do have the mana for the Doomscar, so we can sandbag a little bit. I'll probably play this first and then Fortella just to see what our opponent's doing. Okay. We're gonna foretell here. I'm almost tempted to pray the shrine here, actually. The Sanctum. Depends on what we draw. Because yeah, there's the Speaker of the Heavens. Well, that's perfect. We could just play the green portion of this. Yeah. This may be a little bit preemptive, but I think I'm going to cast this now. Force them to sacrifice a Selfless Savior to protect their Speaker of the Heavens. Because then we can just essentially, next turn, play Sanctum of the Heights, and then just essentially, presuming if they don't buff this at all, discard the Sanctum of the Stonefang and just deal damage to them. Deal with this, essentially. Or we could just, well, we don't have an enchantment out yet, so yeah, I think that's the game plan here. We're going to play the green portion of this. We're going to play the Sanctum of the Heights. We're going to discard our Sanctum of the Stonefangs. They gain a life, but at least they don't have the opportunity to make an angel, essentially. And then now we have Kalets online and such to exile whatever the next problematic threat is. If we can get a swamp source of mana, Binding of the Old Gods is also a possibility. In other words, we have a plan A, but we also have a plan B if the mana dictates it. Oh, that... Well, that's perfect. So, yeah, Calyx. Oh, that is a little loud. Okay, so we're gonna exile Lurrus under this. Hope they don't have a Banshee Light.
Interloper.
There we go. Well, okay, no Banshee Light at the very least, but they do have a good force. Oh boy, we really need a Swamp Source.
Time for me to depart.
Okay, this might be the game where we get Magic the Gathering. This... Because, yeah, they're going to do a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Even if we destroy one of these things... Well, actually, as long as they don't play another thing... Well, yeah, now we're dead. Well, we're pretty close to dead, essentially, because even if we use the Binding of the Old Gods, the only thing we really can do here is Soul Shatter, make our opponent forced to sack the Helios, but even then, I think they still have enough damage on us. Yep, next game. Sometimes you have off nights when doing the Brewing Labs. This might be one of my off nights. Okay. This one, I actually do like this hand a lot. We can play this for the Sanctum. We can then essentially play this or even this just to get Valky out on turn 2 to disrupt their hand. It is a Lurrus list, which usually that either indicates... That can indicate a few things. Yeah, I think I'm just going to play this as the Plains portion. Play the Sanctum. This could mean that they're rogues, potentially, because usually Lurrus is either in 2 decks. It looks like the middle deck, so... Yeah, turn 2 Valky here might actually be really good, because we'll do this, we'll play Valky. And, let's see... They only have Drown in the Lock. They have Ruin Crab, they do have that... Yeah, I'm gonna take their Thieves Guild Enforcer. Limit the mill at least by a little bit. There's the crab. yeah, we want to get the Sanctum out as soon as possible. In these matchups, you do want to try to get that out as soon as you can. So we're going to play that. We're not going to attack in, but we could just be cheeky and just turn into that. Nah, I think the 2-1's a lot better here. So yeah, now the opponent could drown in the lock if they want to. I don't think they're going to, but they could if they want to. And here, we're just going to play, honestly, just the Plains portion. Just foretell this. Fast turn to our opponent. Do they have one untapped mana? Okay, they do. Unfortunately. Because, yeah, they are holding on that Drown in the Lock. Good news is we might be able to just win through essentially more or less life drain alone here if our opponent doesn't get proactive. Also, since we don't need to do anything, we're just going to tap this down so they can't mill us anymore. Yeah, no, opponent. There's the second one. I really just want them to destroy the Valky here. Nah, not yet. What we're really essentially just waiting here is a turn where they pretty much spend all their mana, more or less. So, yeah, better just to take out the 5-2 here. Nah, we'll play this out. If they tap all out, we might have a chance. Yeah, now we're dead. I'll be honest, I don't like the rogues. So, well, let's see if the fourth hit. What's the term? Fourth time's a charm, I guess, in this case. Okay, blue. Green. Sure, we can give this a shot. Potentially mutate of sorts? But Jun mutate? Okay. I'm almost wondering if the game plan here is to play Valky and counter Valky. On the other hand, we could just fish out a card from our opponent. A throwing war, I'm guessing? Yep. Okay, so binding, destroy this. Destroy. Interesting. I kind of want to see what our opponent does next here. Okay, they play that. Makes sense. I think discarding this. Play Gaia. Exile this creature. Force our opponent to attack into the Gaia. go.
So, this is gonna be one of those shows.
Doomscar would be really good once we get that last source of mana. I think the plan here is actually this. We're gonna play this. And then we're gonna counter it to see if we can get into something more significant, one could say. Like that.
Beg. It won't help, but it amuses me.
Yeah, I think we just minus free to make sure that they can't mutate.
I'll be.
And then we can just stomp. Spell. I just now realized we got Tibalt to actually cast Tibalt. That's actually pretty funny. Yeah, I guess we could take this out. Play this. Plus Tibalt.
Surely you can handle a little pain.
I see what you're doing there, opponent. Well, first things first. Actually, we got some choices here. Well, let's see. They're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I think I'd just rather do the board wipe now. Sure. Perfect. We can discard Tibalt's trickery here. We're going to play this as green portion. Then we're actually going to exile this. Because we get both of these. And what we can do here is do this. Do this. Do our own mutate. To go get some mana. Okay. I think our opponent did not realize that I have the ability on the mutate triggers. Though, hey, now we know you can actually mutate on opponent's creatures and give them mutate triggers. If that's ever relevant. Well, good to know. Okay, so we're gonna cast this. I'm gonna cast this. Just so that they're still off Ugin. And we might actually hold this up. Swing in. Okay, fourth time apparently was the charm, at least so far. And the reason why we haven't cast anything else yet is because of stuff like that. We'll wait till opponent activates the trigger. We're going to Soul Shatter. Force them to sacrifice the Vivian. We don't mind if they get a little beast token. And our opponent was like, nope. Yes! Okay, fourth time was a charm with this deck. So, yeah, that was fun. And being able to use Tibalt's trickery to actually counter and get Tibalt is actually... Cosmic Imposter was actually pretty funny. Overall, let's do a quick wrap up of the deck. This is one of those decks where I definitely think you can tinker with it a little bit more. You could either incorporate more board wipes, you can... I've been iterating on this deck so many times, that's why it's been a while to actually get this video out. It's definitely an interesting strategy. You could even go into the cheese strategy and just throw in like a few 0-mana spells and such, maybe cut out like one of the Tergrids and such, and maybe the Soul Shatters, and then just go into the cheeky strategy of trying to cheap out something with Tibalt's Trickery. I still don't like that strategy, but that's something you can do. Other cards I would also consider in the deck is stuff like, of all things, you can actually incorporate, as I was mentioning before, stuff like Raven's Warning within your deck design, because if you do that, you actually can able to tutor out specific cards, like you can go into all shrines, like have all 3 of them, and then just tutor out your shrines in your sideboard, or even like your late game threats like Ugin and such. There's also another variation of this card that I like, that's from Eldraine, which is of course the Fae of Wishes. Does the same thing, but only to non-creature spells. The benefit of the Raven's Warning is you can also get stuff like late game Vorinclex, Tergrid in your sideboard, stuff like that. But if more of your side tech answers are in the non-creature variety, I would say just pick Fae of Wishes over Raven Witches, but you can also incorporate both within your deck design if you want to. Nevertheless, that is the deck. I guess the final thoughts is on Tibalt's Trickery. Should it be banned or not? In my opinion, I'm kind of mixed on it, because on one hand, the EDH player in me kind of wishes that this was just only, if this is a problematic enough card that it only just gets banned, that way then we still have the power level of what this card is in EDH, and still have kind of like the politicking slash element to it, slash also just the power level of the card itself in EDH, even if you want to do the cheese strategy of just essentially taking a dead card out of your hand and try to get into something else. You know, kind of like how you would use Chaos Warp on your own stuff if necessary. Stuff like that. The standard player in me, though, just only kind of wishes that something had to happen to Tibalt's Trickery, that it just gets errata to just say target opponent spell, because then you could actually use this in the Mardu control deck that I actually been having a lot of fun with. So that's why I'm kind of mixed. I do think if this card becomes more problematic and someone finds a shell of it where the deck can be a lot more consistent, especially if in future sets we're going to get more powerful late game spells, this is a card that probably is going to have to be dealt with. Nevertheless, though, it is a fragile card, but who knows. I do like to have a little bit of jank and trickery once in a while, so nevertheless, that is this episode of the Brewing Labs. If you liked it, just please like and subscribe, and I hope you have a lovely day. As they say, hip hip hooray. Bada beep, bada boop.